So you're dealing with assumptions. And you're going to have to build in a process of some redundancy, some competitive analysis into the process. And once upon a time, you had very different agencies and departments, certainly the CIA, that were responsible for current intelligence as opposed to historical studies, as opposed to estimative intelligence that dealt with very important strategic issues. Now all of this tends to come out of one review and one vetting. And again, at the top of this pyramid are general officers who are not necessarily the best people placed to do this kind of work of analysis and the kind of vetting of analysis. So you have to demilitarize and you have to decentralize. And finally, I think you have to get the oversight process right. And here's where I do agree with the 9/11 Commission. The 9/11 Commission very bluntly said that the oversight process, that is the process I talked about that was created in the mid-1970s, is dysfunctional. And I think certainly under the last 10 years, we've seen how partisan the oversight process has gotten. And then under Senator Pat Roberts, the Republican from Kansas, how not only partisan, but Roberts himself proclaimed himself to be an advocate for the intelligence community. The chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee has to be a junkyard dog when it comes to the world of intelligence. He has to be a skeptic. He has to go after the intelligence community and constantly be badgering the intelligence community for evidence, to justify their assessments, to explain their operations, to be able to understand in detail their secret budget, which is 1/10 of the overall intelligence community budget of nearly $50 billion, which is more than the entire world spends on intelligence, and probably more than twice as much as the entire world spends on intelligence. So we have to get this oversight process right. And then finally, in closing, I think there's a simple reform that has to be made that would cost nothing, but is really what the world of intelligence is all about. And it's the inscription that's in the entranceway of the CIA as you go in, to seek the truth, and the truth will make you free, the biblical inscription. This is something that really talks about the moral compass of the CIA, because if the CIA is not willing to tell truth to power, then I think the late Senator Moynihan did have it right, that the CIA should indeed be abolished. So with that, let me open it up to your comments, your questions, please.
Do you think any changes can be made unless Bush is impeached, and what possibility is there of that? We tried to impeach Bill Clinton over Victoria's underwear.
Let me answer the second part first. Impeachment's not a legal process, it's a political process, and there's no stomach for it whatsoever. So the possibility of impeaching George Bush is impossible. I'm not happy about the fact that Nancy Pelosi said that she was going to take him off the table, because it wasn't her right to take it off the table, but the fact is there is no political will, no stomach for that. I am convinced that as long as he is president, he has no interest in intelligence reform, because he has no understanding or appreciation for the importance of independent intelligence, which is exactly what Harry Truman created the CIA for. And when you look at the arms control area in the 70s, when the CIA stood up to the Pentagon, and I don't want to get into some of the arcane issues that dealt with SS-9 strategic missile and the surface-to-air missile on the defensive side, but the arguments that the CIA made countered what the Pentagon was saying at a time that the Secretary of Defense, Melvin Laird, was opposed to arms control. And the CIA fought the good fight, won the battle. Henry Kissinger bought into CIA's interpretation of Soviet strategic programs, and that's how we ended up with the SALT agreement and the ABM treaty in 1972. Bush looks at intelligence the way he looks at all government agencies. They are there to be politicized. Regulatory commissions are not going to do any regulating. Oversight commissions are going to be guilty in an Orwellian sense of oversight. They're not going to do real work of oversight. And intelligence is not going to be provided with the bark on. It's supposed to be provided to make the case that the president wants to make on a given political issue. So this work will have to start in 2008. It could start now if you had very aggressive chairmen of the intelligence committees. And right now you don't. The House Committee Chairman Reyes from Texas, I think, is in over his head and doesn't have the background or experience to be the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee. And even though Jay Rockefeller has taken some of the right positions, I think, on the need for reform, he just simply doesn't seem aggressive enough or energetic enough to really press for the kinds of reforms we need. And I think it's going to be hard to do it because so much damage has been done to the intelligence culture, it's going to be hard to get it right. Yeah.
The intelligence in the U.S. is vast. We have DIA, NSA, CIA. You advocated that the intelligence community should be decentralized. However, how do you then ensure, effective utilization of resources and proper management as far as sharing communication and intel throughout the intelligence community? Would we be more effective if we had something, to some degree like AGB, where everything was very centralized, so that we can ensure that intelligence moves, along the lines?
You raise a good question, and let me deal with the parts of it in terms of sharing, accountability, and redundancy. Redundancy is indeed expensive. I'm not going to argue that it isn't. You have redundancy in the military, and people justify it because of the long term it saves lives, but it's expensive. I think you need redundancy in the intelligence arena because I don't think any single agency or department or intelligence organization can dominate the kind of message that goes into the White House. There must be some competitive analysis. There must be some redundancy. I think that is extremely important. At the same time, I would argue to centralize intelligence would make it too important, give it too much power, and I think it would create a problem in terms of our civil liberties. Because we really haven't talked about that all this afternoon. But in the wake of 9/11 and the Patriot Act of 2001, you can imagine how much damage has been done to civil liberties already, let alone what could happen if there were another terrorist act in this country. We've given up parts of our democracy already. And I think with a strong, centralized intelligence community, we could give up more. Also, I don't accept the notion that somehow, even though I know this is the conventional wisdom, that it was the failure to share intelligence that was the big problem in the 9/11 failure. The big problem in the 9/11 failure was the failure to conduct good analysis. The evidence was there to make the case that there was going to be a terrorist act. Maybe not identify the target any more than we could have in 1941 identify Pearl Harbor. But there was enough material coming in from FBI, from Colin Rowley in Minneapolis, and Frank Johnson in Phoenix, Arizona, the Al-Qaeda operatives we tracked to San Diego who had access to 11 of the 19 hijackers from 9/11 to at least given bin Laden pause and have him certainly scale back, delay, maybe even cancel the operation at that particular time. So it wasn't due to sharing. It was due to a failure of imaginative analysis. So I think for all those reasons, I'm afraid of a massive organization. And when you cite, the example that you cite, the KGB, that I think is the best argument of all. I mean, look at the history of the KGB. Now, that's in a different society, in a more paranoid society, I would argue, where counterintelligence was almost the national sport of the Soviet Union. But even here in the United States, we've already given up too much in terms of our civil liberties. We've given up too much in terms of the national security letters that the FBI sends out regularly to thousands of people in which they're under secrecy provisions.